Have you had a haircut?
I have had a haircut. Hi everyone, we're now live. Yes, Jack, I have had a haircut. That's what.
Risky game for you, isn't it?
Can't believe you went to the barbers with lockdown and all.
Well, I have a barber downstairs, mate.
So you broke the law.
I broke. Well, if letting my missus touch me is breaking the law, well, that's breaking the law. Yeah, I broke the law.
Breaking the law.
Yeah. But I got my sick fade in.
Yeah.
Sick fade.
Yeah, it's a fade.
So it's.
Sally's going to kill you.
Yeah, I know. She's going to kill me. Like she's going to kill.
Yeah, she's kill you for your.
Whatever. Time. Yeah, whatever comment you made, I'll be dead. It's not. It doesn't matter. Like so, the more you say, the more dead I am.
You know what, George? It was the perfect amount of time knowing you. In a way, I don't think our friendship could have went many more.
As far as it could go. Yeah.
It's already went.
Enough.
As far as it could go. Yeah. It was fine. Yeah. Welcome, gentlemen. How are you? End of lockdown is near. How's it going?
Well, good.
Yeah,
good news, isn't it?
It's happy. Yeah, really good news.
Really very good news. So although I've been stood up all day, I wish I had an ergonomic chair to be able to use throughout the day for Zooms. I'm fed up of sitting on the floor.
Oh, man. Do you know what? That's hard. It's hard just standing up and being still because you're not moving around in the gym. When you're just stuck there, it's annoying. But I would still prefer to stand and sit.
Shall I tell you what I'm sat?
Up.
Shall I tell you what I'm sat on?
What?
Sure.
Kids piano chair.
Oh no.
So it's actually really comfortable because I'm actually, if you look, I'm actually like in like a nice,
That's all right.
Yeah.
It's sad, but it's all right.
Yeah. I know. Obviously, we all saw how Darth Vader I went in the gym last time.
Yeah.
So and I've been in there all day from like 6 until pretty much now. So the lights are dying already. So I thought, well, there's no point. I may as well come in here in the warm,
Yeah.
You're
in the hallway. Where are you?
I'm in. Sally's decided to change my room round, so I'm still in my room, but like I was over
your room.
And then
Sally's in
her separate rooms.
Yeah, they got that married.
It's just that everything in the house is mine. That's all I'm saying.
Sure.
Right. So even if you're in your kids' room, it'd be your room.
My room, yeah. They're just allowed to stay in there for a bit.
Right.
Okay, guys. So we are talking about the best ways of losing body fat, particularly around your stomach area. Okay, so this is a question we all commonly get asked by people: is how do I lose this bit? And there's no real way, is there, guys, other than the way. There's no way. Yeah, you can't. That bit always stays. Yeah, forever. Doesn't matter how lean you get.
I think that's why it's the common question.
Not get them alone electrode. What about getting the electrode packs? Packs that just go in your stomach.
Oh yeah, like the Ronaldo belt thing you can get. Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, you're right, Jack.
No, I think it's always the question because it's always the last place to go for most people.
Yeah.
So, for whatever reason, that's why people search for it. They're like, oh, this is what I need to get rid of, is because normally it's the last place to go, whether that's whatever the reason. But I think that's why it's such.
But it's also a place of sort of like you notice it. So if somebody's quite slim up top and they've got a bigger belly, it's one of those places that stands out. So it makes people feel conscious. Having bigger arms is much easier or like slightly fatter arms is much easier to hide than having a stomach that sticks out. So I think it's just consciously people are aware of it, aren't they?
Yeah, and then there's this whole thing about how a person's body is supposed to look from at the front of like magazines, health magazines, when they put a shredded guy at the front of there, and people have this idea that shredded guy or girl walk around shredded like that all the time, and in reality they're probably holding some body fat around their middle most of the year, because that's the way we are, and
because they took 365 photos on one photo shoot and then post them constantly all year round when they look their sharpest for that time.
Exactly. They dieted down to that point. They probably dehydrated that day to make them look even leaner. They oiled up, they tanned up, and they got a photographer to take pictures in the perfect lighting, right? So they get that straight. So I think first thing is something I wanted to address is managing the expectations of individual and getting people to understand what a normal person in good health should look like. And it shouldn't look completely shredded. You should be should be fairly lean. Should be able to maybe see a muscle tone of your stomach and in your arms or whatever if you're working out, but it doesn't need to be massively defined. I think you did a post, Jack, about Zac Efron a while back. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah, when he's in very good shape, and then all the newspaper articles or online newspaper articles started to say he's got a dad bod now, and he's still in insane shape.
Dad bod did TV, but
I think it's because, and it's the same with what you're saying. I think it's because obviously everyone sees him like in a film like where he did Baywatch, where he was even more shredded, and you can even hear him on the show that they were talking about. He says on there how he basically just didn't eat carbs for like 6 months, and that's how he got shredded. And it's unrealistic, and it goes to the point where I think, especially with belly fat, like, to answer the question, there is no specific way. The answer is there is no way. It's annoying but there is no way. And I think, especially with belly fat, it's the last to go, but then also I think, especially for women, there's so many fluctuations with their hormones, with water levels, everything inside their body. That area, specifically around the stomach, that's what almost changes and fluctuates so much. So it's the one thing that where if you've eaten something that's maybe inflammatory, you feel around your stomach a little bit bloated, so that puffs out a little bit. But then you think in your head, oh, well, I need a flat stomach, because in the images and everything you see online, their stomachs are dead flat. Whereas it goes back to what you guys just said, where that's not how they look. They look like that for 10 minutes in a photo shoot. But after that, when they're not tensing, they're not lighting, they probably, more than likely, they probably go and have like 10 peaches and end up feeling like you do feel now, right now, where they're bloated.
Exactly. And going back to the post, Zac Efron in that picture, you just couldn't see his abs or the definition of his muscle as much, but he still looked in really good shape. And I think that's what we need to remember, is actually that is really good shape. And get the idea of, I need to be absolutely shredded to get that, and that will help you. And then you understand that little bit of belly fat that I've got there right now is completely normal. And going into the logistics, I think a bit more of losing it. If you do want to do a photo shoot or something like that, a lot of people do at the end of their goals just to have kind of a goal set for their fat loss. It comes down to what you said, Jack, is you've got a diet and be in a calorie deficit just for a long enough period of time before that happens, before you get so lean that last bit of body fat is nearly nothing, really. And that is the last bit to go on most people, like Simon said.
There's the reason why it's the last bit to go is if people understand that, because not everybody's got the same problem area. Some people have, like, the hips are a little bit fatter, some people's legs are a little bit fatter. You know what I mean? Somebody carries weight on their chest. But the way it's working here is that the leanest parts of your body are going to get leaner first, because they're a lot closer to a blood supply, which means your body can readily use that fuel that's there and it's available and put it into circulation and burn it up as fuel. Because like you two are saying, you need to be in a calorie deficit to lose any body fat. So considering you are in a calorie deficit, your body is just working like a machine, and it's just choosing and picking where it gets its energy from. And like you said, it will go for the easiest places first, and then it will start chipping away at the places that are left. So if you have a particular area like your stomach where you're carrying a lot more body fat there than you are, let's say, on your forearms, what are you going to notice first? Your forearms are going to get really lean. Your veins will probably start showing through, and you will get leaner in lower parts, but you'll always be looking at that stomach thinking, oh, you know what I mean? I wish I could get that off, but it is still going down, and it is still slowly just trimming. But again, if you've got that much thickness of body fat, there's that much that isn't getting near the blood supply at all.
If you're listening to this and not watching, then that's about 2 inches that Simon was demonstrating right there.
But if you've got an inch of body fat versus having a couple of mil of body fat, it's closer to the blood supply, which means it is closer and easier to get in there and use as an energy source. So you will lose it. Everybody out there who's, there's some people who went from zero to hero and done bodybuilding competitions where they were really, really overweight and got super, super lean, and it works. It just takes that bit of time. And you want to be, for me, it's like, look at all the other areas as well, because you're trying to instill motivation and keep motivation going. Look at all the other areas that are getting leaner, and I guarantee even that one area, like your stomach, that you're trying to get lean, is still getting leaner. It's just, you look at it more, you think about it more, you feel it more. But that's why it's happening, because there's more fat, thick, fatty tissue there, and it's further away from the blood supply. But the calorie deficit wins everything.
Go on, Jack. Please, you go first, Jack.
Am I making this up? When is there not an element of it of sort of just human survival and nature involved in it as well? Because your body, if you're providing the stimulus of going in a deficit, so your body is realizing, okay, we're not getting in as much energy as we should, and so we're losing it.
Yeah.
I think am I making this up? Where your body be like, okay, well, in terms of priority, everything on the outside limbs isn't as important.
That may be
in terms of protecting, insulating, but then so all your organs, everything worthwhile is around here. And so if you think it needs energy, so it thinks fat is an energy source, however way you spin it, it will keep it around here the longest, because that's where the most important parts of your body are in terms of keeping warmth, insulation, everything like that.
It makes sense. I don't know how true it is, but it does make sense.
Well, it does. I think it makes sense.
It's still doing the same thing. It's still going to be your last area to lose. You still can lose it, but the main thing is to focus on the priority of the goal here, which is to drop overall body fat, isn't it? And if you're dropping overall body fat, and that measure's coming down the last, as long as it's still moving, it does not matter. You've got to stay true to what you're doing, and don't go and start having body wraps and all sorts of weird muscle techniques, like where they're just zapping you full of electricity. There's no
listen to that guy on YouTube who says you need to eat for your body type in the adverts. All the time. Just skip him. Skip ads.
He does come up every time. Yeah, I've never
all the time. Go away.
Yeah, I know, but it's an easy sell, isn't it? All these people are endorsing these one specific things are just they're salesmen. They're trying to say that theirs is better than the rest, whereas the best PTs, nutritionists, and trainers out there will utilize all the information given and choose the best route possible for the client.
Yeah.
But so anything like that, it's just, there's no need.
So I'm gonna ask you this here, guys. So we talked about obviously that being the last bit to go. So let's say that your stubborn area is your stomach, and that's got the most amount of fat there, like Simon said. Now, how do we prevent people from going into the calorie deficit? And we all know people that do is they go into too deep of a calorie deficit. They don't really manage what their nutrition is and the type of training is, and they end up losing weight that isn't necessarily more fat than it is muscle. So what would you do? How would you approach that with someone when they are losing weight, their body, everything's going down because you're a calorie deficit, so you will lose body fat and muscle. But the stomach isn't going down quite as quickly as you'd like. And it looks to you from the person's energy levels and just visual appearance that that's muscle they're losing more of. How would you approach that? One of you, I don't mind who goes.
So I think shame them.
I'm just gonna point next time. Just go, Jack, go.
You have to say everything. Just pointing at the screen won't do anything. There are two key things would be, one, probably the protein level in their diet, and second, how they actually train. In that case, it would sound like they're not eating enough protein, however they want to get their protein. And then second, they're probably not doing the required training. They don't have the required training stimulus to maintain their muscle or improve it. So the body's just burning everything away. They're the two key points, just to keep it short and sweet.
Yeah, that's all we need really, because this is where, running got a bit of a bad rap in the health industry from certain corners of the health industry, I should say. a few years back, if you guys remember. Now, I think that came from this point that people were talking about weight loss, and that exactly what you said, Jack. That's the type of training where, yeah, you'll burn calories and you'll lose weight. But if it's just running or just kind of that sort of cardio that you're doing, then you're not going to really retain much muscle on that. So you need a bit more of a varied program, which is where, 2 or 3 resistance training sessions a week becomes really, really important. And
which will help the overall goal as well. Help everything. Like it'll help the running that you're doing. It'll help everything.
Yeah, it will, and then we talk about retaining muscle. We'll also talk about joint health, like we did in the past. So for the people who wonder why personal trainers like us use resistance training as part of a fat loss program, that's one of the main reasons. We're basically trying to retain as much muscle as we can, so you can actually lose more body fat than muscle. If you're on a calorie deficit for long enough, you will naturally start to deteriorate muscle. It's just the way it is. Although Simon, you did talk to me about once about a way of actually holding and gaining a little bit of muscle while in a deficit of calories. Can you remember that? We were talking, I think Phil Learney may have brought it up.
But that was more, it's a very complicated and it's a harder line to choose in terms of like actual exercise and diet. But mainly diet, that's where you're in a calorie deficit for a few days and then in a calorie surplus for a few days to stimulate muscle protein synthesis. And it's literally just dipping you in and out of being deficit and then surplus, but overall you're either maintaining or slightly in a deficit.
Okay, so it's steady and slow, basically.
It will be very slow. Obviously, for somebody who's a newbie to the gym, who's a beginner to training, losing fat and building muscle is quite a common thing to happen because they don't have any muscle to begin with. So you're filling it up with substrates. You're helping them store more carbohydrates in the muscle. You're helping them store more fluid in the muscle, so it will make them have more muscle essentially. But there's always a stage where if you're in a serious deficit where that's going to be pretty much impossible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's going to come to a point where you're just trying to keep the amount of muscle that you have and make your body choose fat as the fuel source. But also in there, like Jack was saying, and we talked about before, along with all the training and everything, like you always got to have that protein intake as high as possible for your needs. No matter what's happening, your body needs protein to protect itself and they grow and repair. And that's everything we do. It grows and repairs every single day. All our cells are turning over. There's tendons and ligaments and bone structures and soft tissue. It's always just being regenerated. And your immune system needs the protein. So if you're not getting it, your body will happily choose muscle tissue as a fuel source because it's much easier to break down than fat is.
Yeah.
I think a key point for any listener to realize is the title of this podcast will be how to lose belly fat, which can go down to lose weight. And we haven't spoken about doing a single ab exercise or core exercise the whole time, because really I think that's a common thing that people do. Like, I need to go do 100 core exercises at the end of my session and smash out these exercises just to get rid of this little bit of belly fat around here. But as I just said, we only discuss nutrition because it's important that core exercise is done in the right way with the right stimulus in the right program. But in order to reveal all the work you do with those exercises, essentially, is through your nutrition. And
there's even a case in point of like doing too much, like in terms of core work, where you're actually hypertrophying and growing the muscle that's in your core.
You can
a good example for me, you always think about is CrossFitters. CrossFit women all have the same build. They all have they're all different shapes and sizes when they come in, but they all end up, the elite athletes always have the same build. Big shoulders, big traps, blocky abs, because they do abs and wads and all that sort of stuff, don't they? So they do a lot of weighted ab work, toes to bar. And because they do so much core work, their core just gets thicker and thicker. And they've got abs, and you can see they've got abs, but their waists are extremely wide in comparison to like a figure competitor or something who are way leaner, but they're trying to taper that waist in. You know, bodybuilders used to do it all the time, and they stopped doing abs now pretty much just because they're like, well, we want that waist to be small. When it comes in and gets leaner, we want it to actually be smaller. We don't want to train it so much that it hypertrophies and gets bigger and
so
wider.
obliques push out, the abdominals push out, and it looks like they've got a bit of a
much
belly,
like
doesn't it?
You train your arms get bigger, and they push out against, and they look bigger. So there's just
I wouldn't know about that,
obviously, but it's a good thing to think, because like, you know, we've all worked there, and I worked in a public gym for years, and I used to get people all the time asking me for the best exercise for the core, and I've used this example before, but even before I knew too much, I knew that wasn't the answer, because I used to never train abs. I used to always just do the big lifts, and I always had abs because I stayed lean. So to me, it just made sense that, like, well, why waste your time doing exercises that don't burn as much energy when you could be focused on ones that do and actually make an impact, the overall composition. And one of the bodybuilders in there, who was, you know, Britain's natural bodybuilder #1, and I used to use him all the time. I'd be like, Steve, come here. I'd be like, Steve, show them your abs. And the girls would be like, all right, get his abs out. And I mean, they were diamond cut. There was 8 of them, and there was 4,000 obliques down the side. And then I'd be like, Steve, can you just demonstrate to me what ab workout you do? And he'd get down the ground and do a tiny little crunch. He'd hold his stomach and do this tiny little crunch where you'd just be moving, just his abdominals. He's not trying to come up too high, get his hip flexors involved and all. He literally did 3 sets, 3 times a week of 20 reps on a crunch. And it's a tiny controlled crunch. And he's just like, it's just the build more tension in there. And he's like, it's nothing else, really. And he was sharp, man, absolutely sharp. And they'd be like, right, okay. Because they're always like, oh, what burns the most? They're, oh, my ab exercises don't hurt anymore. That's great. You're progressing. You're doing really well. Then if they're not hurting, that's a really good sign.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the overall message here is what Jack said, is focus on, not on the ab work, and what you just mirrored there. So don't focus on the ab work, and get the nutrition right, get yourself in a calorie deficit, and be patient. Because if you want to get really lean, if you want to see your abs, that's what you're gonna have to be. Yeah, there's gonna have to be. It falls into some of the stuff we were saying in the previous podcast. So how would you keep someone on track if how would someone keep themselves on track if they're not seeing a coach? If they're starting to get, you know, frustrated that it's not happening quick enough, or they're not seeing any, or they feel like they're not seeing any results. So I asked Jack last.
I'll go. Just like I was been saying, so do some form of track and measure. So whether you're on your own and you're doing weights, you're taking pictures, or you're taking actual measurements, have something in place that you can check visually that will give you some feedback as to what direction you're going. Because like we said before, your stomach's going to be the last place to come down, and if your stomach's the main thing that you're focusing on, you don't think it's moving, and it's going to kill your motivation. But if you've measured your arms, your chest, your hips, your thighs along with it, and they're coming down as well, you can then justify to yourself that you're on the right track. Everything is progressing exactly how it should be. That's your stubborn area, so expect that to start going down last. And especially if you're only partway through your fat loss journey, you know, it's going to come down, but if the rest of it's moving, that is exactly what you should be looking for. And then just keep checking up on that to make sure the progress is going forward.
And if the progress stops,
make a change. Got to make a change somewhere.
Yeah.
Make a change. Sometimes not even make a change. Check and see if your consistency has been on point. A lot of the time, people get a bit slack as they get through diets because they think, no, I've got this. And sometimes their measuring's off, or they're just slightly over on the calories that they're balancing out. So check your consistency first, but then if not, make a change. And I would always suggest making exercises the change first. There's been good results coming out with studies recently saying that there's a lot less metabolic, not damage, there's no damage, metabolic drop if you're increasing your exercise in order to be in a calorie deficit than there is just taking your calories down. So increasing your steps a day by 5,000 would do a massive, or would change you massively going forward, because that's an extra 200 calories a day.
You mentioned, just going back to protein a second, Simon, just because you mentioned
Give me 3 seconds there.
No, okay. So perhaps I'll get you to answer this one instead, Jack. Classic dog.
I was going to add a point to Simon's point with the,
okay, no, go ahead, and then I'll ask. Sorry, yeah.
With the, you said use the factors that you use to measure your results, so your photos or weight or whatever you're using. But I think sometimes when people use the photos, they'll only ever look back at the last set they did.
Yeah.
Which will be the smallest change. So it's always good to have all of them out and look at the very first one to be able to see, actually, you've come a hell of a long way, rather than, oh, well, I took these 2 weeks ago and I can't really see a difference. It's like, well, yeah, it's 2 weeks ago. So have all the photos involved. And then the other one you can always use is ask someone or go see someone you don't see regularly.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee they'll see the difference in everything you've achieved more than you, because you look at yourself every day, whereas they won't. So that's the person that's going to actually notice, and then that'll just give you a whole boost.
Yeah. Motivation, keep the motivation high. So onto the protein, just back to it a second. You mentioned that we needed to get enough in for people, especially if they're in a calorie deficit. So it's the body fat being lost, not the muscle so much. How much protein, loosely, as loose advice, would you give someone to intake?
I would always go for the upper range of 1.8 to 2 grams per kilo of body weight. I would always go there.
So if someone's 100 kilos,
1.5, but 1.5 was advice. But if you're 70 kilos, 140 grams a day, upwards, or within like a 10-gram fluctuation of that. But I wouldn't. Every study out there supports it. You're looking, increased satiety, increased protein synthesis, and then all the other benefits. Then it goes along with, like I said, your immune system and all will be backed up from that. But I would always go for 1.8 to 2 grams. 2 grams if you're training more, 1.8 if you're training less.
And when you start losing weight, would you then adapt that? Or would you just kind of keep it where it is? I suppose if they've lost a substantial amount of weight, you would change it. But if it's minimal changes,
absolutely. I mean, if you lost 10 kilos, adjust it accordingly. Because there's no point. You don't want to be eating, especially when it comes to choice of calories. People, especially females, don't always like the protein intake. So you can switch out. You lose 10 kilos. You switch out 20 grams of protein, and then increase your intake by 20 grams of carbs. You know what I mean? It's going to make somebody a little bit happier when it comes to meal time.
Yeah, so that's a really good way of keeping on track. If someone swapped the protein in for some, at that point. And could you just briefly explain protein synthesis to anyone that's listening? Because you've mentioned it a couple of times, but
it's just that how your body's churning proteins over, breaking them down, absorbing them, and delivering them to where they need to be in terms of like the tasks that they need to do. And it usually down regulates. Now, back in the day, it used to be thought that we increase our protein intake on days that we work out, and you can drop it on the days that you recover, but it's actually the opposite, really. The days that you work out, your protein synthesis is actually stimulated by the fact that you broke proteins down muscle tissue and do during training. So your body's craving for it, the hormones are upregulated, therefore we're absorbing and using protein at a much faster and more efficient rate. On days that we don't train, your body obviously isn't getting that stimulation, and especially from 30 onwards, I would say. In your 20s, you can do whatever you want. But from especially 30s onwards, your body needs bigger bouts of protein for that same stimulus in protein synthesis. So instead of having 4 meals, let's say, let's say 30 grams a meal, it would be better to have 3 meals of 40 grams per meal.
Right.
Having that bigger portion of protein, you really stimulate that, and then ensure that you're carrying on, growing. Because there's a lot coming out now with twice a week training, which is based all around protein synthesis. If you're having a lagging body part and yada yada, so make sure that you're stimulating and turning over and growing more. So, more protein on days off, I would always go for.
Yeah, so that allows for what you're saying. So if you're not getting the intake of the protein, all the things that protein is required for in the body will be still used just from the muscle tissue, and that's how we basically break down too much muscle if we're not eating enough protein. I think that's good for the listeners to understand, because it puts into you guys' heads why guys like us talk about protein so much and the importance of it, especially when we're on a calorie deficit. Have we missed anything, guys? Anything we've missed on that particular
I
topic?
don't think so. We covered quite a lot, I think.
No.
Lots
Yeah,
of little
absolutely.
topics that we can easily expand into and podcast on their own, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, well that's us then, gentlemen.
Are we going to talk about that you're wearing your daughter's t-shirt, or are we going to leave that for next week?
Well, this is, I mean, it fits me perfectly now. You know, considering I've lost.
I'm surprised he's not wearing a gi.
Yeah, I've lost 8 kilos in weight as well, so it's quite snug. You know, so that was a bit of a surprise face then. Since the first lockdown ended. Since the first lockdown ended, so I was 75 kilos.
Have you?
Now.
Why have you done that?
It's not really intentional. I've kind of when I
Went back to you're trying to get leaner, aren't you? But
I was trying to get slightly leaner. I was trying to get slightly leaner, but my output. Well, I also went from being in lockdown to then walking to work and back 3 times a week, plus the 5 sessions, plus the starting jiu-jitsu. So it's a lot of output going in, and I dropped my calories a little too low. So it was a pretty furious amount of weight loss. And then I've started to bring it back up, but I'm still obviously losing weight. So I think I'm still losing weight on about 2,600 calories. So, that was
more.
So eat more, yeah. But yeah. So because of that, I'm fitting very snug into my daughter's clothes. It's fine. It's cheaper. Cheaper.
I think
buy
you got
children's
a whole
clothes.
new wardrobe.
A whole new wardrobe.
It's
cheaper.
Gap Kids.
Gap Kids. Man United tops for 14-year-olds.
Every slightly pink.
Yeah. All right then, gents. Thank you very much. See you same time next week.
Beautiful.
We're gonna try and get a guest on soon. Try and get a guest on soon, I think. But we'll be back to you guys on that one.
Awesome.
Have a good one. Good luck back in the outside non-lockdown world next week. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Cheers, boys.
Awesome. See you later.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening.